Right, so Joe Biden's departure from power seems to be dragging on inexorably, not least because his premiership will generally be remembered by most of the world for enabling the Israeli regime of Benjamin Netanyahu to raze Gaza and now begin attempting to do likewise in Lebanon as a ground invasion began just yesterday morning. But the worst bit about Israel ramping up its aggression and seeking that wider war, which Biden keeps saying mustn't happen, whilst he also deludes himself that a ceasefire is close when no such thing has ever been true. But the fact is that this isn't just delusion by Biden, it's worse than that. Because he's just betrayed everything he said he stood for in the Middle East, betrayed everything he claimed to want, because the White House has apparently encouraged the invasion of Lebanon by Israel by green-lighting this Israeli incursion into Lebanon. The US are backing it. Biden seems to think a shift in military strategy is the right thing to do. A limited strike on Lebanon will be sufficient. But Gaza proved that was never the case. The history of Israel invading Lebanon and taking it over is well established as well. Just how much more aggression will it take for Biden to wake up? Because not even breaching a UN resolution, as he has done here as well as Israel by sanctioning this action, seems enough to do so, it seems. Right, so Israel have invaded southern Lebanon, and it has been greenlit by Joe Biden to do so, it seems, because Biden is still deluding himself that giving Netanyahu some flex is the answer to ultimately ending things and achieving peace. He is therefore a fool. Every ceasefire attempt has failed because of Netanyahu. Every atrocity that we witness now after 11 months is because of Biden arming Netanyahu. I really cannot countenance the rationale of believing peace is the answer, while still providing the aggressor with all the tools to just carry on. Yet this is what Biden and Blinken have done repeatedly and are still doing now, even having sanctioned this raid on southern Lebanon. The Palestinian news outlet Quds News Network have laid out Biden's supposed intentions in this excerpt here. US President Joe Biden believes his administration has reached an agreement with Israel to limit the scope of its planned ground invasion in southern Lebanon, according to sources cited by Axios. The operation is allegedly expected to focus solely on border areas, avoiding a larger-scale conflict reminiscent of the 2006 Lebanon War. Two sources with knowledge of the discussions revealed that the White House is confident it has influenced Israel's military planning to keep the operation geographically contained. However, a senior Israeli official clarified that Israel's initial plans were always intended to be limited, indicating that US involvement may have reinforced rather than changed Israel's objectives. While the agreement focuses on keeping the operation within specific boundaries, US officials have expressed concern about the potential for escalation. Historically, limited operations in Lebanon have grown into prolonged assaults. The Biden administration has warned Israel that an extended invasion could bolster Hezbollah's support amongst ordinary Lebanese citizens and destabilize the region. Quds News Network have cited Axios there, a US news outlet, and fundamentally there it's Biden kidding himself into believing that Israel will only conduct a limited strike. It won't end up that way. Lebanon and Israel too easily come to more prolonged and wider-reaching blows. It's why a UN resolution was passed to keep a larger chunk of southern Lebanon clear of weapons, and why the UN itself employs a peacekeeping force in that area to enforce such matters. The United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, or UNIFIL, and Biden has stamped all over that as well. Despite being a UN member, the US support for Israel has meant that no US troops have ever formed part of the multinational UNIFIL task force. And so by agreeing to Israel making a small invasion of southern Lebanon, it now puts the lives of other UN members, states, their people, who were involved in that project at risk. But the UN resolution Biden has also binned off by apparently signing off on this incursion was one of the US actually voted into being as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. It's UN Resolution 1701, which called for a permanent ceasefire and a buffer zone following the 2006 Israel-Lebanon war. The wording of the resolution itself calling for the immediate cessation by Hezbollah of all attacks and the immediate cessation by Israel of all offensive military operations in Lebanon. The buffer zone related to this resolution is shown on this map, where you have the blue line itself forming the border between Lebanon and Israel. Further north, another blue line, which is the Litani River, which is roughly 20 miles from the border. The resolution buffer zone is all of the land in between, which must be kept free of all armed personnel, both Hezbollah and Israel, and which UNIFIL are there to patrol. Any crossing of the blue line constitutes a violation of UN Resolution 1701. This is what Israel have done as of yesterday morning with the assent of the US. Already it seems Biden's assurances have been completely rubbish, because in their customary fashion, Israel had been sending messages to Lebanese communities in the south, encouraging them to evacuate further north. It's how much further north that is the question. Where the buffer zone established by UN Resolution 1701 is all the land 20 miles south of the Litani River in effect, Israel have instructed southern communities to evacuate north of the Awali River, which is 40 miles north of the southern border. Nothing quite screams, we're going a lot further north than just the southern incursion we promised Joe Biden. The Awali River is roughly a quarter of the way up the entire length of the country. Interestingly, Israel, in what has become a customary show of arrogance by admitting to wrongdoing and obviously fearing no repercussions ever from it, have admitted to having breached this UN resolution on multiple occasions over the last year. So the entire time they've been razing Gaza to the ground, if you choose to believe their words here, especially since these words have come from our old friend on such matters, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, who this channel prefers to refer to as Mr. Pointy, such as has been his customary action when pointing out alleged evidence of Hamas criminality, from lists of Hamas ne'er-do-wells, which just turned out to be calendars, to weapons caches hidden behind extremely magnetic MRI machines, because it's all physics-defying stuff in Hamas, to laptops where the keyboard was in Hebrew rather than Arabic, but it's still very definitely Arabic using Hamas who were using such things. Israel can be a strange bunch, claiming credit for stuff they may or may not have done, proof of they may or may not have, yet not caring if they themselves are implicated in wrongdoing too along the way. Anyway, Hagari's claim has been that they have launched dozens of operations in violation of that UN resolution over the last year to blow up Hezbollah tunnels, weapons arsenals, and other Hezbollah infrastructure besides. Certainly worth an investigation, if only to work out how UNIFIL might have missed Israelis being where they shouldn't have been, really, if they were indeed there at all and not just blowing smoke up their own backsides again. Functionally, we have a stupid course of action being perpetrated here by two stupid old men egging each other on in the form of Biden and Netanyahu. Israel must be protected, the project preserved, and therefore this facade of Israel being some kind of unstoppable force because it is guarded and protected by the world's largest, if perhaps now fading, superpower in the US, is dragging both nations and any others still hanging onto their coattails, like us here in the UK or France or Germany, down the toilet with them. Israel is damned reputationally and damned economically because of what it has done in Gaza in recent months in front of the eyes of the world. And while Biden might be happy to keep footing an ever bigger bill to keep things going, and a bigger price will indeed be paid if Lebanon is the next target for severe warfare, where Israel has had a right to defend itself all this time against people who it occupies, meaning it actually didn't have a right to defend itself against them at all, the reverse being very much the truth, Lebanon happens to be a sovereign state in its own right. Hezbollah, regardless of Western attitudes towards them, are part of the political picture in Lebanon as well. But will the same people calling for Israel's self-defense and self-righteousness also say Lebanon has a right to defend itself now as well? Somehow, I doubt it, and that's a double standard the general public might very much more easily latch onto. Lebanon is also far larger and far better armed than Hamas and Gaza, and if that fight has cost Israel an estimated 10% of GDP as things stand now, how much more will this one cost? And that's not even factoring in the cost in lives, of course. Netanyahu and Biden don't have a strategic brain cell between them. It's incompetence and braggadocio and arrogance from a pair of Zionists whose combined idiocy will more likely see Israel fall than succeed. US-backed military campaigns have had such wonderful success in the past, after all. Just look at what 20 years in Afghanistan achieved to know that. Israel fundamentally have taken on more war than they can fight and have overreached, and continue to overreach. In desperation, Netanyahu just keeps making more and more enemies, and Biden can hand him as much by way of arsenal as he likes. It's a fight that can't be won. Not like this. Every incursion, every day of aggression, every atrocity meted out against whoever is just one more nail in the coffin for the Israeli state. They are destroying themselves by continuing like this. Its survival depends on a ceasefire. But that can't come for Netanyahu to be able to remain in power as well. That man, I am certain, would happily preside over a pile of ashes as long as he can still call himself Prime Minister of it. And Biden will still be funding him along the way. Lebanon, I think, is going to be a reckoning if Israel push farther than they claim they plan to. And even that may prove too far given what response it will likely invite from Lebanon, Hezbollah and their allies as well. Certainly it looks like if Israel do persist in carrying on with a war they can't win, it looks like someone else will end up having to foot the bill for basically just keeping Netanyahu in power. Because that is what it all amounts to, in my opinion. As Israel's credit rating just got downgraded again by it, as it happens. And if it drops much lower, As war in Lebanon will apparently assure, according to the credit reference people, Israel runs the real risk of warmongering itself into failed state territory. I think Biden and Blinken would still keep giving them cash even then, to be honest. What about you? Check out the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.